Tonight we encounter 5 people who had front row seats in this incredible real-life drama. Mary, friend of Jesus. Simon Peter, Judas. A Roman soldier, Mary, mother of Jesus. And Salome. Sometimes this story feels only like a story to those of us who have heard it so many times. But it was real. It was painful and rich and life-changing for generations and generations of Christians after it. But how much more so for those who lived then and loved this man named Jesus. Just as we have found that there are gifts in the wilderness, these people perhaps also found their place in the world, their true calling as a result of a walk in the wilderness of life. Let us allow these ancient people to call us more deeply into our faith story.
John 12, 1 through 11. 6 days before the Passover, Jesus came to Bethany, the home of Lazarus, whom he had raised from the dead. There they gave a dinner for him. Mary took a pound of costly perfume made of pure nard, anointed Jesus' feet, and wiped them with her hair. The house was filled with the fragrance of the perfume. Judas objected. Why was the money not used to feed the poor? Jesus said, "Leave her alone. She bought it so that she might keep it for the day of my burial."
I was in the middle of the marketplace that day, and it hit me like an overwhelming wave of feeling. I loved him so much. It was a love beyond anything I'd ever known. Not romantic, not like a sibling, certainly like family, but he was so much more to me. He was teacher. He was priest. He was wise one. He was hope itself. And for the first time, in those days before the terrible thing happened, I felt he might not be invincible. He had told us. He had warned us. He had been saying this could happen all along, but I just couldn't imagine it. He was so eternal, it seemed. Like nothing, not even God, would dare to take him away from any of us. But the tension was building. I would beg him, I thought, to not go to Jerusalem. Just go back to Galilee. Go to the hills. Go to Nazareth. Go anywhere but Jerusalem right now. But even as I thought it to myself, I knew that he wouldn't go. This is where he was supposed to be, with all these people gathered for Passover. Jerusalem is where he had to be, and I knew he might never leave. I suddenly became aware I was still standing, shocked still, oblivious to all around me, here in this marketplace, and I began to double over with fear. But just as I did, my eyes came to rest on the stall to my right, a jar, a most beautiful jar of anointing oil. The seller offered it to me for a price that seemed outrageous, and I didn't care. No price could compare with the price of my teacher, my master, would pay. And so I bought it. Whether in life or in death, my beloved friend would need it.
John 13, verses 3 through 8, 12 through 16. When they finished supper, Jesus got up from the table, took off his outer robe, and tied a towel around himself. Then he poured water into a basin and began to wash the disciples' feet and to wipe them with a towel. He came to Simon Peter, who said to him, "Lord, are you going to wash my feet?" After he had washed their feet and returned to the table, he said to them, "Do you know what I have done to you? Learn from me. You call me teacher, Lord. If I have washed your feet, you also ought to wash one another's feet."
He continually baffled me. My whole time with him, one surprise after another, Jesus turned my whole world upside down, especially when it came to relationships. We would worry about who was his right-hand man, and he would turn it around with his last shall be first stories. I wanted to know where I stood with him. I needed for him to be my Lord, my master, my teacher, and he was. But then he went and did this foot washing thing that night. Now, none of us were really high lineage, but we weren't slaves or servants. I mean, at the meal that night, there were people to wait on us. This is a service that just comes with any good room rented out for a meal. But I had planned to wash his feet that night. I was overwhelmed with love for him and fear for his life. I had this nagging need to show him, demonstrate to him, that I would do anything for him. But before I could even begin, he knelt before me. He insisted on washing my feet. I was horrified. I thought maybe he was losing his mind. But one more time, he reversed the way I thought things would go. He just kept doing that. He said to me, "You can't be part of the family of God, the kingdom of God, Peter, if you don't let me do this." As if I couldn't see that he really meant what he said about serving our neighbors, our friends, and our enemies. He always kept me off balance. I thought I knew what he meant, and then it seemed like I just wasn't getting it. I had to surrender all my preconceived ideas about how relationships are, how they go, who we love. I had to surrender and let his loving act of washing my feet heal my soul and heal every disappointing relationship I'd ever had.
John 13, verses 21 through 30. Jesus was troubled in spirit that night, and he said, "I'm telling you, one of you is going to betray me." The disciples looked at each other, not sure who or what he was talking about. Peter leaned over to Jesus and said, "Lord, who is it?" Jesus turned to Judas and gave him his own piece of bread. "Go quickly," Jesus said to him. "Do what you're going to do."
I was so angry with him. Why wouldn't he fight? We had so many followers by this time, and so many were in Jerusalem right now. Why did he insist on this blessed are the meek stuff? I think all along I had hoped that this was the revolution, that we would finally stand up to the Roman occupiers. And he had such power and charisma. Couldn't he have done anything? This Son of God? I suppose my bitterness finally took over. I had kept it all inside for some time, and it had started to boil and rage until I just snapped. If I couldn't get my revolution, I could get out. I was tired of holding the purse for this motley crew of people who gave it away as soon as it came in. And then I discovered I could get out with some money from those dirty Romans. It all happened so fast. They approached me. They had seen me, watched me, perhaps read my indecision and my anger and my separation at times with the group. And it just happened. And then, there I was at the table, his table, knowing that I had set into motion all of this. All of a sudden, I was flooded with panic as we all sat there. The air felt heavy with fear and unknowing at the table again. It reminded me of all the meals in our years together. Sometimes just us, this small band of disciples, but often with someone Jesus had invited to dinner. Someone we couldn't believe, yet again, he was hanging out with. Sometimes it was hard to understand. People who took advantage of others. People who had no interest in supporting him. People who questioned him. People who were beneath him. Really, he invited anyone to the table, those bottom feeders. Then I realized as he stretched out the cup of wine to me and dipped the bread in it, that he saw right through me, through my thoughts. He was doing it once again, inviting a scoundrel to dinner. Only this time it was me. He was offering to share the cup and break the bread with despicable me. He would never have hurt anyone. He loved us all, even the lowest of the low.
After dinner, they went to the Garden of Gethsemane, and Jesus prayed. And then the soldiers came, and they arrested Jesus. They took him to the council and to the governor's palace, where they tried to make it look like a trial, but it wasn't. And then, finally, they led him away to the place where criminals were hung, always on crosses, so that they would die slowly, painfully. Jesus was hung in between two other crosses, bandits on each side of him, and the sign over Jesus' cross said, "This was the King of the Jews."
The scene was horrifying. Not that I wasn't used to crucifixions. They were the favored way of putting prisoners to death by the Romans, and so I had assisted many times. But I had heard about this man, Jesus. We thought Barabbas was going to be on this cross, but the crowds had become almost out of control, and I'd heard that Pilate simply washed his hands of it, sent this one to die just to shut them up. Who knows what these crowds really were screaming about? There was so much confusion and rumor. No one will probably ever know the truth, is what I think. But when the reality hit his followers that Jesus was really going to die, and they saw him heading to Golgotha with the cross, the horror really began. Even the heavens seemed to be wailing as storms began to appear. It gave me a chill. I'm going to tell you, these are not things I want to tell you. I am a soldier, but it is always easier protecting others than protecting yourself. From the mothers who beg for mercy for their sons, from those who insist on waiting the hours and even days it takes to die this agonizing death, being a soldier can't always protect you from what you witness firsthand. Like hearing Jesus talk to the prisoners on the other two crosses next to him, the promise that death is not the end for them. And then he looked at me, right at me, and he spoke the words I'll hear for the rest of my life, and the words that mean I can no longer do this job anymore. Father, forgive them, for they not know what they do. Later, after he died, they pierced him in his side. I still don't understand why, but in that moment, I knew that he was truly the Son of God. His blood poured out, just like the love he poured out for his people. The blood flowed from his side. The blood flowed. The love flowed.
Standing near the cross of Jesus were his mother and some other women he had known well. When he saw his mother and the disciple John there in front of him, Jesus said, "Take this son in my place. Take good care of my mother."
My son, from the moment the angel said to me, "You will bear a son," my life was no longer my own, and yet it was every bit mine. Moments treasured, remembered in my heart alone. Every moment he grew within me, every day of his youth, every movement of his ministry from that day at Cana to this very minute. At times, the pain of watching him give his life away seemed harder to bear than the wonder of this unimaginable life God had given me, and especially now. In this moment, I am not just the mother of Jesus shedding tears for my son. I am the tears of any mother who has seen their child die before them. I am the tears of every mother who has lost children in war and injustice. I am the tears of all loved ones who cannot save their loved ones as they starve, or are taken by illness or injury, or are swept away in a tsunami or a flood. I know the tears of mothers whose children lose their lives to addiction, who are consumed by depression, who are lost to violence, and I am the tears of all those who do not know the fate of the missing ones. I am the tears.
Mark's gospel mentions our last character at the scene of the cross. Some women were watching from a distance. Among them were Mary Magdalene, Mary the mother of James, the younger, and of Joseph and Salome. Salome later accompanies the women to the tomb.
I was there at the cross, just as I had been there for the last several months, one of his many followers. But I was not just a follower. I was companion to Mary, friend of Jesus, and the other Mary, mother of Jesus. And at this moment, they truly needed a friend. So many of the followers had fled as soon as the guards had come to the garden that night. But I could not leave. I would stay with my sisters, my friends, at the cross, and through the agonizing depth of Sabbath, keeping stillness until it was time to anoint and prepare his body for burial. I knew how to tend to the dead. Tending to his body would perhaps help me find comfort in the darkness. There in the tomb, with the memory of him, even in his lifeless body, I would let my movements carry me into a future I was afraid I could not face. As music continues to play, Mary and the others will lead us to the cross, where we will stay with Jesus a while, praying for all those who suffer in this world. Our time together this night will end in the prayer chapel. And so I kept my lamp close after the Sabbath had passed. But that is a story for another morning. For now, I carry the lamp to keep us company in this vigil. For I know, deep down, that nothing can snuff out the light, the hope that he gave to all of us. We carry it within.
And now, may the Spirit of the living God, made known to us most fully within life's wilderness, go before you to show you the way, go above you to watch over you, go behind you to push you into the places you may not necessarily go yourself, go beneath you to uphold and uplift you, go beside you to be your strong and constant companion, and dwell within you to remind you that you are surely not alone, that you are loved, loved beyond your wildest imagination. And may the fire of God's blessing burn brightly upon you and within you, now and always.